I need to brush my teeth.
One, two, one, two, one, two, one, two.
Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, let us continue on with our discussions of this great work, which is known as Twin Peaks, Mark Frost and David Lynch's brilliant work that has so much popularity and such a following the world over. And as some of you may know, we have been going through this series episode by episode with episode-specific discussions. And today that brings us to a discussion about episode 29. This is an epic episode. There's so much going on. It is so significant in the history of Twin Peaks, in the sweep of Twin Peaks, and indeed everything that built up to this episode, and indeed the potential and possibility of things to come. If any. So there's a lot riding on many of the events that we see here, I would say. And so this is really epic. Also directed by David Lynch as well. So, and also the season finale of season 2. So a lot of things going on. So now let us focus our attention on the events leading up to and including this episode 29. As we have done with previous episode-specific discussions here, I'd like to focus our attention, however, primarily on the events leading up to and including episode 29. Nothing specifically beyond this. We might hint at things, we might guess at things, we might make theories about things that might or might not find some kind of embodiment somewhere down the line in subsequent episodes. But for the time being, let us focus primarily on these events leading up to and including episode 29. And I should point out that I am in no way an expert when it comes to Twin Peaks, so I'm going to make a lot of mistakes along the way. I'll try to stop myself from making as many mistakes as possible, but I apologize in advance for anything that I will get wrong, but I'll try not to going forward. Now, with all that being said, let's get right into this. Wow. And what I love too is that it has so many events, there are so many things going on, and indeed, as we know, there is a lot of things that we are revisiting, as well as things that are new, as well as things that are left unresolved in terms of how this episode ends, for example. So there's a lot of events and indeed confusion and a great way, and also resolution, but it's sort of in an ambiguous way. And it's creating a real heightened pulse and tempo leading up to a climax that is truly out of this world. And so there's so much here. And so with all this being said, what I love about this episode is how it begins in this very soft an intimate and tender way between Lucy and Andy. This is and it's also it's tender, and it's a moment to like regroup after all the chaos that we encountered from the previous episode's conclusion, with the confusion and the destruction and the danger caused by Wyndham Earl and the Miss Twin Peaks competition. But now we have a quiet moment between Lucy and Andy, and that lovely close-up with their heads leaning against each other in a very heartwarming way. And Lucy expressing her fears and about the danger, and of course her unborn child, and what if her unborn child had she gone into labor in a very difficult time, etc. And all these what if questions, because of course it was a real brush with death in a manner of speaking. And Andy, bless him, he is there as a type of pillar of support. He is there as someone who loves Lucy, who would support her, even in her most difficult situation. And so that is a great reestablishment and reaffirmation of their relationship, their bond. As we recall from the previous episode, Lucy made her decision between and who would be the father of her child, and thus who would be the person that she would be with. And that choice was Andy, much to his great delight. So here we have a type of epilogue, in a manner of speaking, to that story arc, which came all the way from the beginning of the series, or the beginning of the show. And now we have that epilogue, but also we have also a reminder of the tenderness of their relationship, of the importance of that bond, and also the the sort of pillar of hope and the type of shining light that I think this couple represents, as shown, for instance, in the way that Andy is really coming through. I mean, Andy is in many ways a type of MVP, in a manner of speaking, because he understood that the owl cave drawing was a map, and also he is showing his support here as well. So what a brilliant character he is. I'm a big fan. So it's a great way to open the episode here with this tender moment that is also reminding us of the bonds of love that are also part of the tapestry of Twin Peaks, the very important tapestry. And then going into the next scene, which is in the room with the owl cave painting, which now has been recognized as a map, and Cooper looking at this and recognizing a number of things. Now, this is a really jam-packed scene for a lot of reasons. So we have all the elements of what we could consider to be the mystery part of the show Twin Peaks. Who killed Laura Palmer? All these things that were part of the tableau and the environment and the backdrop throughout the season 1, and also throughout, say, the first part of season 2, leading up to the revelation of who killed Laura Palmer and Leland Palmer and Bob. So everything up to this point has been the Laura Palmer storyline. After such episode, of course, we went into different realms, in a manner of speaking, of Twin Peaks. Dale Cooper being under investigation, and then James leaving, and the whole thing with Evelyn, and the idea of Nadine and high school, and then Miss Twin Peaks and Wyndham Earl, and all these things turned the show perhaps away from the mystery of Laura Palmer, because of course we had a resolution at that particular point with the revelation of Leland Palmer and Bob. So after that was resolved, then of course we turned to other focused our attention on other aspects of the Twin Peaks community. But now, with this episode 29, we have the elements of the Laura Palmer mystery returning. So, for example, we have the notion of the log lady, Margaret, who had been seen, or people thought it was a log lady at the Twin Peaks contest with Pete Martell there. But no, we understand that this was Wyndham Earl in disguise. And so this is one element here, and so this brings Pete in, and then this leads to the idea of Margaret, the log lady, coming to the room and then bringing the oil. This is a jar of oil, and this is something that she describes about her husband, her late husband, and about how he described it as a gateway. And so this is also very important too, because the smell is something that we remember from the Laura Palmer mystery element of Twin Peaks, right? The smell of scorched or burning oil. Now, this smell came up in a number of places. For instance, we are reminded here between Cooper and Truman about the smell, how it came up when Dr. Jacoby was recalling, when he was in the hospital, the smell. And this was a smell that was at the time that Jacques Renault was killed by Leland Palmer. So that's one thing. And also, we as viewers recall that when Maddie was running down the steps just before she was killed, she was mentioning something about a smell of something burning. And indeed, when Ronette Pulaski comes in for this particular scene, again, we see her again, so that is also a reminder of the Laura Palmer mystery element of the show Twin Peaks. Then she is given she is allowed to smell what this substance is, and she recoils in fear. This is to suggest, therefore, that this smell seems to be very important with regard to whatever happened with the mystery of Laura Palmer, who killed Laura Palmer. So this is very important too. And also we have a type of element here, which is we have the element of the 12 sycamore trees and the Glastonbury Grove and the legend of King Arthur. And of course, as Pete, I think, very astutely mentions, King Arthur is buried in England. So this is a good for Pete. I love Pete. And so Pete always knows when to when to be there. I mean, ask Audrey. I mean, Pete came to the rescue when Audrey really needed a ride to the airport before Jack was going to leave. And so Pete, what a great character he is. But so we have now a type of element here about the woods, and we will find out too, if we recall, the arm reaching out from seemingly out of nowhere, and Bob, and some kind of clue involving some pool or thing that seems to be reflective. And this is something that is now we understand the element that's added to this, which is the ring of 12 sycamore trees, and the name Glastonbury Grove. And so this seems to be the clue or the hint or the gateway or portal to perhaps what this thing is that we have also been hearing about for a lot of the latter half of the show, which is the Black Lodge. So this seems to be also very important. So this is a reminder of things that we heard in the past, but also it's adding to the mystery or the legend that is Twin Peaks, including, of course, the recognition of this place, Glastonbury Grove. So this seems to be very important. The oil, the scorched oil smell, this is also very important. Also, Hawk reminds us too about this, when during the investigation, about finding the pages of the diary and also the bloody towel. And so this is, he says, this was the location. So all of these elements are linked within the same scene and within the same scope of minutes. And so it's almost like a previously on Twin Peaks moment when we're getting all these details that we had spoken about in the first part of this show, and then we kind of didn't speak about for a while, but now they're returning. People that we didn't see before are returning, such as Rona Pulaski here. So this is big stuff, and so it seems to be trying to tie things together from the first half of the show in this brilliant way. And indeed, just following this forward, then we have Truman, and Cooper going to this place in the middle of the night, and then we have, prior to this, of course, we had Annie being taken there against her will by Wyndham Earl, on this idea of fear somehow opening the gateway, which is the kind of clue that Wyndham Earl seemed to get from the previous episodes. And then we have an earlier scene where Wyndham Earl and Annie enter the circle, and the appearance of these red curtains, this vision or a specter of red curtains, and they walk through. And so a little bit later, Cooper and Truman follow in suit, and then Cooper seems to go in ahead of Truman. Truman waits outside, of course, while Cooper before him, and the sycamore trees. He goes into the circle, and what do we find? The red curtains, and we see him disappear into the curtains and into this void to the unknown. So this is a very big deal, a very, very big deal indeed. And also we see the return in many ways of the red curtain motif. This will come in very importantly when we get to the final part of the climax scene of this episode, which is in many ways one of the most important and most significant moments in all of Twin Peaks. But we'll talk about that a little bit later in this video. And indeed also we have Truman waiting so patiently and so with such a loyal, steadfast way that Sheriff Truman has in his fiber, in his being. It's so lovely. And Andy joins him a little bit later too. And Andy, bless him, is asking him about something to eat. And so what a great scene that is between Truman and Andy. Loyal to the very end. And so we shall see what happens with Truman and Andy, if anything, as we go forward. But here we have a state of uncertainty because Dale Cooper is now missing in some ways. And we'll talk a little bit later about what we see him in this particular space as well. This particular it's interesting too. I wonder what happened to Dale Cooper's sort of trench coat. But in any event, yes, we'll talk about that momentarily. But let's now go to other parts of the episode before we get to this scene. So other parts of the episode also very important in terms of resolution of a number of things. Nadine, Mike, Ed, and Norma, this storyline, because as we know, Nadine and Mike suffered some pretty severe injuries at the Miss Twin Peaks competition. Nadine suffering that injury, a head injury. And now it seems like that injury has had a very significant impact because she no longer thinks that she is a 18-year-old high school student. She is quote unquote back. And so she's now thinking about the drape runners, and she's not into Mike anymore. And so she's back in her thinking with Ed. Much to the kind of horror of Ed and much to the confusion of everyone here in the room, because of course everyone had been just about ready to sort of separate Mike and Nadine going one way and Ed and Norma going another way. And so with the return of Nadine in this way, so Mike seems to suggest that maybe it was his fault, or maybe he kind of got a little sort of got a little bit carried away, I think is the way of describing it. And Ed, of course, is back in this mode where he was at the sort of first part of the series. And then, of course, that leaves Norma too. Norma hanging in the balance. Of course, all these recent previous episodes, Norma and Ed were ready to get together and ready to change their lives so they would be together. But now with this final wrinkle of the return of Nadine, it looks like there might be some very, very significant complications in those plans indeed. So what will happen to Ed, Norma, Nadine, and Mike? What Ed and Norma in particular? What's going to happen with Nadine? What will happen with those drape runners? Will they ever find a suitable patent attorney that will help them hopefully patent that invention? Because that was one of the things that was a very key thing for her, Nadine, in season 1. So and they couldn't find a suitable patent expert to help them, and so this is one of the things here. And so this is a very important aspect of the return of Nadine, also recalling details from season 1, etc. So what's going to happen here? Again, we're left hanging. We are left hanging, and that look on Ed's face. Everett McGill, that look on his face, it's really something else. I love Big Ed, and Everett McGill has such a great performance here. And that I can't, that great look. It's like a look of confusion etched in stone forever. It's really beautiful indeed. What's going to happen again? You're not sure because we're left hanging here. But it's another cliffhanger in a manner of speaking. And then also going into another part of this episode, we have Twin Peaks Savings and Loan, because as we know, Audrey, in previous episodes, working for her father, going to Seattle and coming back, finding out, in essence, she tells us, the sort of Twin Peaks Savings and Loan and the Packards and the use of the loan, savings and loan, and the money flow. And so in some way too, maybe connected with that also, maybe with connected with her recent interest in this concept of civil disobedience, we understand that Audrey is going to the savings and loan here in one of the scenes, and she goes there to essentially stage a public protest, and as part of the Stop Ghostwood movement. And there we have Del Mibler, the great Del Mibler, and those great glasses. My glasses, I love these glasses, but at the same time, I wish I had a pair of Del Mibler glasses. Those are so great. But here we have Del Mibler, and then we have Audrey chained to the bars and the barred doorway, and she demands that this be made public in the Twin Peaks Gazette. And then also we have giving her something to drink. And then, of course, at this time too, we have Andrew Packard and Pete, because in an earlier scene we saw Andrew Packard take the key. So this is the key, of course, that leads to some kind of safety deposit box, and it was under supervision so that Catherine and Andrew, and indeed perhaps Pete, wouldn't double cross each other. Well, now we have Andrew essentially double crossing Catherine, and he goes there with Pete to the savings and loan to find the box, which will be unlocked with this key. and Del Mimler is there showing them the way as Audrey's still chained or handcuffed or fastening herself to the door there, or the bars there. And what do we find? Finding the box, opening it, and what do we see? We see a final message from Thomas Eckert. It's got you, Andrew. Love, Thomas. And just as Andrew is about to maybe scream out some kind of profanity, everything explodes. Everything explodes, and so there is a kind of there is a shocking thing that happens here. So the explosion happens. We see from the outside the smoke that comes from the explosion from inside, and we see this slow motion shot of these glasses, the Mimler glasses, flying and hitting some foliage or tree branches, suggesting something very, very devastating has happened. And we don't know what's happened. Again, it's another cliffhanger. What's happened to Andrew? What's happened to Pete? What's happened to Audrey? What's happened to Del Mimler? What's happened to the others there? Just as, of course, we had in the distance too, it sounded like, one of the personnel there talking on the phone, talking about a child. So what's happened to all these people? The person at the desk sleep? What's going on? So again, we're left wondering. We're left hanging. Another cliffhanger here. And yet, too, a little bit earlier in the episode, speaking of Audrey, there's also the issue of Ben Horne, right? Because Benjamin Horne and Eileen Hayward, and then by extension, Donna Hayward and Doc Hayward, because we know from the previous episode that there was the revelation from Ben, I am your father. And so, the implication is that I am your father. And so Donna is now seen confronting her parents, right? Doc Hayward and Eileen Hayward, and Ben Horne as well. And Sylvia comes back too, saying, why are you ruining this family? And so this type of super climax in terms of the Donna, Eileen, Doc Hayward, and Ben Horne storyline, with the return of Sylvia, Donna essentially being very, very upset and proclaiming to Doc Hayward, you're my dad, you're my father, you're my father. And so there's so much at stake. And then what do we have from Doc Hayward? This is a very rare show of anger and frustration, and indeed violence too, because now the secret has been let out. And this is something that he tried to prevent from happening in order to protect his family and protect his daughter. Ben Horne, too, having his own motivations, wanting the truth out. And so you can understand both sides of this. But now the truth is out, and everything is now really, the various foundation and structures being threatened and perhaps destroyed, perhaps even forever. What happens here? There's this altercation between Ben Horne and Doc Hayward, or perhaps to describe it in a different way. Essentially, he attacks Ben Horne to the point where he gets smashed into the wall there, and he falls down. And Doc Hayward screams in this way, and then the shot of crying Donna, and that ends that particular storyline. So there is another cliffhanger that we see with the Doc Hayward, Eileen Hayward, Ben Horne, Donna storyline, and indeed by extension Sylvia and the Horne clan itself. And note here too the smashing against the wall of Ben Horne, and Ben Horne falling with a bloodied face. Does this remind you of, say, the scene involving Leland Palmer and Maddie, or Leland Palmer, Bob, and Maddie? It has some very, very eerie overtones of that, I would say. Incidentally, too, maybe a similar scene, but yet very different in tone, is the scene in a previous episode where Nadine was attacking Hank in the living room area there. So there are many instances of the living room space in Twin Peaks being the scene of violence, in a manner of speaking. Here's yet another example. Doc Hayward essentially attacking Ben Horne falling. We're not sure, is he unconscious, or is his injury quite severe? Maybe is he dying? Who knows? We're not sure. Doc Hayward is now streaming, and what's going to happen here? What is the resolution? Again, this is a cliffhanger as well. And then we should point out too another aspect too is the diner. And what I love here is the scene between Bobby and Shelley at the counter, and the entrance of Heidi, who comes in, and the idea of her being late, and not getting the car start, jump starting, etc. And there's a sort of sexual innuendo, and the laughter of Heidi, and we have that the exchange between Bobby and Shelley. So why is this moment here, right? It's a very interesting and perhaps potentially a key moment. Recall from the pilot, from the very start of the show, we had a similar setup of this, and similarly situated as well. Bobby and Shelley and then at the counter there, and Heidi coming in, and essentially the same or very similar sexual innuendo laden joke that's mentioned about jump starting, and then Heidi giggling, and then going forward in that. So it's the same. It's a little bit different, but it's the same or similar scene. There are some differences, of course, one of which being in the earlier sequence, Bobby and Shelley, although they were together, they didn't reveal it as such. They didn't let anyone know. Whereas now, they are very much openly together. And he says they express their love, and Bobby says, "You want to get together? Let's get marriage and stuff." And then, of course, Shelley reminds, of course, that she is still married to Leo, and what about Leo? And we get a shot of Leo and the string and the tarantula. So what's going to happen to Leo too? That's another cliffhanger. My goodness, add one to the cliffhanger list of this episode 29. But then we have this part again, which is a type of repetition of an earlier scene from the very start of the show. So what can we take from this? I think there can be a number of things. I think it's a reminder of what we saw in the past. Again, a lot of episode 29 is linking back to the first episodes, the mystery, who killed Laura Palmer thing. And I think this mirror or parallel scene is a way to do that. Another thing too to keep in mind is a lot of what we see in Twin Peaks, there's a lot to do with repetition, and there's a lot to do with not just repeating action, but even maybe in a way repeating scenes. And maybe scenes are repeated, although there might be some slight variations. And maybe in the repetition of a scene, it might lead in the same trajectory, or it might lead in a very different trajectory. So let's keep this in mind. Maybe we can think about examples from episodes past where we might have seen repetition, or the idea of concept of repeating or repetition. We might see something about repetition, repeated action, repeated scenes that perhaps were from previous episodes or previous moments of Twin Peaks that are then revisited. Who knows? We might see something like that going forward. But that's something that I think is going on here with this, which is the idea of repetition. So, again, it's also a reminder of Shelley and Bobby. It's also we also see in the booth there, right? Major Briggs and Betty, so the whole Briggs family is here in a manner of speaking. So that's great, and of course they are, I think, very much happy and in love, or they're shown to be in embrace, because we understand that Major Briggs came back after being missing. Or not missing, but he was apprehended by Wyndham Earle and very nearly killed, but he was able to escape thanks to the great efforts of Leo Johnson from a previous episode, of course. And so I think this is the reflection of that, of course. And then we have Dr. Jacoby, coming in with Sarah Palmer. Here's another person we haven't seen in quite a while. And she comes in and she says she has a message. She has a message for Major Briggs. There is maybe a type of hypnotized look on Sarah Palmer's face, and when she speaks, it's a very slow voice, and talking about, I'm in the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper. So what does this mean? And then this is an opportunity to go back to these scenes involving this very black and white, jagged, almost Z-like motif on the floor, and the red curtains, and the statues, the sort of reminding us too of the quote from that's exchange between Dale Cooper and Gordon Cole in an earlier episode, talking about Shelley Johnson and Venus de Milo, of course. So we're going back to this room, this place that we saw from a vision or dream, all the way back from an early episode from season 1. So it's all leading to this place, which you understand is probably, yes, most likely the Black Lodge. And so let us go to the Black Lodge scene. And so if we recall from earlier in the episode, Dale Cooper and Sheriff Truman, upon realizing the significance of Glastonbury Grove, they go there, they find the sycamore trees, they go in, or not they, but then Dale Cooper himself goes in, and we are well on our way into the Black Lodge scene. And what do we find? We find, of course, Dale Cooper in his suit, not wearing a trench coat anymore, in his suit, walking through curtains, going down a hallway, going into another place and the room, and we hear something on the soundtrack, some very intriguing music. And when we go into this main sort of theater room, what do we see? We see the strobe light effect, and we see someone standing in the room there, and we see some furniture, and we hear some words that are being sung in the distance, right? Something about under the sycamore tree. And then who do we find but the emergence of this figure who's been referred to as the man from another place. Now he is back. He comes through the curtain as we hear the very ominous and quite sinister melody of this song. So we have many things going on here. So the return of the man from another place. And this is not a dream, or this is not a vision. This is actually the space that Cooper is occupying. And so this is in many ways, because we've seen the man from another place in dreams or visions, either in the reference to the dream or vision from an earlier episode from season 1, or remember at the point when Josie died, we saw the image of the man from another place dancing on the bed, and then it disappears. So those could be said to be like visions. But here we have, in an interesting way, the first time that we're meeting the man from another place within the same, say, physical space, in a manner of speaking. So that seems to be quite significant. Also, of course, the song, Sycamore Trees, is performed here, Jimmy Scott. What a scene this is. I should say from the outset that Sycamore Trees is it's one of the most important pieces of music associated with Twin Peaks, and I dare say too it's one of the most important pieces of music associated with the works of David Lynch. It is, for me, I think, the song that I listen to the most whenever I revisit the songs and music of Twin Peaks. It is a song that I listened to, I think, 3 or 4 times, in fact, before I sat down to prepare these video discussions. It is the song that I think, for me, speaks of the haunting, disturbing nature of Twin Peaks while being so cool and so Lynchian and so strange and so with such a great instrumental and melody. Under the sycamore trees. It's very, very important. So this is what a great moment here. And then, of course, we have the strobing light effect and the turn of the head of the man from another place as he's sitting there listening, looking first at the singer, Jimmy Scott, and then turning, looking at Dale Cooper, indeed at us. And we have those great close-ups of Dale Cooper's face, which is the first component of the Black Lodge scene. And of course, we go back to other parts of Twin Peaks, and of course, we have this scene with Sarah Palmer giving the message to Major Briggs, and we go back to the hallway, and it cuts to a commercial break, and it comes back to the final stretch of this episode, Twin Peaks, episode 29. And of course, we have so much things going on here. So it looks like, for example, the return of the waiter and the giant. Coffee. And we have the cup of coffee, which seems to be very significant as well. And so the cup of coffee, we seem to be under the impression that the giant and the waiter are one and the same. And then we see someone who looks like Laura Palmer. And we see, again, the discussion between the man from another place and Dale Cooper. When you see me again, it won't be me. Some of your friends are here. And we see images of Laura Palmer. We see images of Leland Palmer. And of course, Laura Palmer is very significant here because she seems to be both angel and demon. And right, I'll see you again in 25 years. Meanwhile, we also have to keep in mind numbers are very important in the world of Twin Peaks. We heard the mentioning of the number 12 from earlier in the episode, the 12 sycamore trees reference. 25 years too. This number seems to be very significant. Let's keep this in mind. 25 years. What does this mean? I'll see you again in 25 years. Meanwhile. Wow. And then I mentioned that she has a sort of angelic force, but also a demonic force, because we hear her a little bit later in this part when she says, meanwhile, and we hear that scream, that Cheryl Lee scream. Now, this is also very important and scary. Very, very scary. If you recall, there was a moment in an earlier episode where we saw a type of flashback of the killing of Laura Palmer by Bob. And there was a moment that I mentioned where, as a quick shot, as it was lighting on her face, it made her look almost demonic. And that similar type of feeling or attitude or attribute, I think, is happening here with the Black Lodge scene and her screaming for purposes of sort of the terror, but also the horror. And Laura Palmer as a force of good, but also perhaps, maybe, who knows, representing some kind of evil or demonic force. We're not sure, but in any event, this is very unnerving indeed. Someone who we've been following, we have been loving, and we have been caring for, because she has been the tragic victim of this. Who killed Laura Palmer? This is the whole crux of the mystery of the show, Twin Peaks. And so she has been the ever-present, absent presence, right? Ever-present, absent existence. So talk about a contradictory phrase there. But that's the whole point of Laura Palmer, and we have loved her, just as the many members of the Twin Peaks community have loved her as well. But with that, all that love, when we are confronted with these scenes in the Black Lodge of her screaming at us in this really scary way, it's truly disturbing. It is really, really disturbing. And we are left wondering, what does this mean? And then, of course, a little bit later, we get the word doppelganger. Doubles. Where have we seen doubles before? I mean, we've seen doubles play themselves out in many forms in Twin Peaks up to now. Maddie, of course, pretending to be Laura in a lot of the scenes to lure Dr. Jacoby out and to the gazebo, etc. Pretending to be her, calling. She also says she became Laura after Laura died. And so in many ways, the absence of Laura Palmer inspired the presence of the double or doppelganger in the form of Maddie. So there's a lot being said there. Of course, there are other doubles going on. Many mentions of Bob and Mike, Bobby and Mike as well. And of course, we know that there are two sets at least of characters who have the names Bobby or Bob and Mike. Of course, we've encountered other characters in this world of Twin Peaks who have the name Bob, or we've heard of those characters who've had the name Bob. But the point is that there seems to be at least this doubling going on. And two, in a manner of speaking, up to now, there has been a type of nuanced discussion or hint or possible road of interpretation as to the nature of Dale Cooper himself, because Dale Cooper is the hero of the work Twin Peaks. He is the one we are rooting for the most. But every once in a while, when he refers to the past, Pittsburgh, Caroline, Wyndham Earl, what happened, his quote-unquote weakness, he let his guard down because he was in love, and that caused the great tragedy of his life to occur, the killing of Caroline and Wyndham Earl, and his plot began. This could also be said to be possibly a sign not necessarily of weakness, but perhaps a dark side to Dale Cooper. Now, whether that is indeed inherent of his character or not, that might be something that we might have to determine going forward because of what happens at the end of this episode. The real embodiment, the ultimate representation of the frightening aspect of the doppelganger theme of Twin Peaks, played to the most nightmarish conclusion. that one could have suspected, or one was hoping that wouldn't happen, but indeed the nightmare come to life. And Dale Cooper at the very heart of this, Dale Cooper and Bob, as we know. So the idea of doubles or doppelgangers is very important, and it's even visited upon here. And we have the idea of Maddie too, being visited upon here. So the double is even doubled upon here as well. So the split of Laura Palmer, the idea of Maddie and her scream, and how that is also frightening us to our very core. So this is a type of play on the theme, yet also a driving force that's giving us a full nightmarish version of the ultimate conclusions of what the doppelganger is and how it's serving its function in the role of Twin Peaks, or in the world of Twin Peaks. And of course we'll see that going forward. We also saw, of course, the double aspect, the double-sided nature of Leland Palmer, of being occupied by Bob, and what goes on. What was the psychological outcome of that? What was the psychological effect of that on Leland Palmer? We can only speculate, but we might find out more details or involvement about that. But yes, this is also very, very important indeed. So indeed, maybe the reappearance of Leland Palmer is a reminder of that, the importance and significance in a thematic way, and also plot-wise way, of the doppelganger or the double. And speaking of Caroline and Wyndham Earle, we also see images of Caroline, and this is a reminder of seeing the face of the man who killed me. But this is also a ruse, we understand, because this is to lure Dale Cooper in, because in fact Wyndham Earle is waiting, and he wants to essentially win over Dale Cooper, and with using his love of Caroline, but in fact Annie, as a type of bait. And that's been the whole plot here, I think, in terms of reaching the Black Lodge and a final revenge ploy against Cooper. And Cooper willingly agrees. He says, I will, allowing Wyndham Earle to essentially stab him, with Annie there as well, and also visitations or revisitations of the bodies on the floor, and also a very disturbing image. And going back to Wyndham Earle and the confrontation between Wyndham Earle and Dale Cooper. But what do we see here? A type of role reversal, and Bob coming back, and Bob having Wyndham Earle in his clutches. We find out that ultimately Bob is the ultimate evil force, or one of the ultimate evil force, certainly more evil and more forceful than Wyndham Earle, who is just shaking in Bob's grasp, and he's saying, be quiet, right? He can't ask for your soul. He says, I will take his in this flash of light or fire, right? Fire, walk with me. And of course, the fire signifying the leaving of the soul, the death of Wyndham Earle, in this really volatile and quite viciously visual way. So, yes, that is the end of the Wyndham Earle character as far as we know it. Perhaps, maybe, or maybe not, we might try to consider Wyndham Earle in future considerations of Twin Peaks. But this looks to me to be the end of Wyndham Earle. But again, we shall see if that's truly the case. But now we have the return of Bob, and we have this idea of repetition of rooms, and this almost amorphous aspect of the geography of the space of these rooms, and the red curtains going from one room to the other, trying to find the exit but not being able to, also at the same time being chased, and then of course the emergence here of a kind of doppelganger Dale Cooper, who seems to be very evil indeed. And this is also the laughing aspect, and the eyes, and that shot of them, Bob and the evil Dale Cooper, let's call him that as well, and the final chase between, quote-unquote, the good Dale and the evil Dale. And, let's remember that phrase, the good Dale. And the good Dale is in the lodge, right? And so, yes, what's going to happen here? So there's a final chase through these, again, amorphous space. Does he escape or not? There's a final grasp. We're not sure what's happening. Someone, they might have caught each other, or evil Dale might have caught up in time, or maybe not, who knows. But then we see Dale Cooper emerge out into the woods once again. in the dark with Truman there. And then, of course, we go to the shot of the hotel, Great Northern. And who's there but Doc Hayward? So what we might have to look at this and maybe consider that maybe Ben Horne is okay, but again, we're not sure. But Doc Hayward's there as though nothing happened. But in any event, good for Doc Hayward. But what does Dale Cooper say here? I need to brush my teeth. And so here we have the final moment of this episode, and indeed of the season, which is him alone in the bathroom there, the tube of toothpaste. Looks in the mirror, crashes his head into the mirror, and what do we see but the reflection of Bob? Again, all our nightmares have come true. The evil doppelganger double theme has come to life in a way that is so utterly frightening, and the floor, everything is taken out from under us. We are left lost. And where are we? What words do we see? What words greet us in this state of utter panic, utter desolation, and utter confusion? What words greet us in this state of confusion and chaos? But how's Annie? How's Annie? Right? How's Annie? The cliffhanger, in many ways, one of the great cliffhangers of all of Twin Peaks. How's Annie? Ending on a question. Ending on a question. Let's consider going forward if we might see other episodes that end on a question. But in any event, the question here is, how's Annie? And indeed, so much meaning, both positive and negative, is loaded into that. And of course, we're left wondering what is happening, because we're talking no longer about Dale Cooper, but we are talking about Bob. How's Annie? So this is it. This is episode 29 in a nutshell. So a lot to say here and a lot to digest, I think. And so many things. Of course, I forgot to mention the coffee, the varying states of coffee, both as a liquid and also as a goo and also as a solid substance. So that seems to be important thing. Because of the state of shifting, say, dynamics. The physics is changing, but also the simple thing, but the glorious thing like enjoyment of coffee. Now that is subject to shifting physics. The laws of physics are changing the dynamics of coffee. And so there seems to be, if this is a world where coffee, the simple joys of drinking coffee are going to be affected, then we're in for a really chaotic ride indeed. And my goodness, this is chaos come to life in all forms. And the brilliance of this episode is the fact that we have chaos and confusion that greet us, and all the loose ends have been tied up in a manner of speaking, but then there are more loose ends that have been exploded onto the surface. We are left wondering what is going to happen going forward. We might not be able to find our answers until the subsequent discussions when we talk about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me and beyond. But in the meantime, yes, how's Annie indeed? Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. We're going to continue on with the Twin Peaks discussions, my dear friends, because the next item for discussion will be the film Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. So won't you join me for a discussion of that film at the next video, my dear friends? But until then, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great TV shows and movies like Twin Peaks or Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, etc. So until the next video, my dear friends, be well and cheers.